Helen's tweet regarding black people living in a state of perpetual victimhood is highly insensitive. It is hurtful and it is deliberately provocative. I'm deeply saddened, uncomfortable, and I'm no longer at home in the Democratic Alliance.
Is the South African government waging a silent war on Afrikaans? According to Helen Zille, the controversial Bela Act, clauses 4 and 5, could be a dangerous step towards erasing Afrikaans-medium education in the country. Let's break it down. Greetings, fellow South Africans, and welcome back to Inkari It's Time. Today, we are diving into a heated debate in South African education. The Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, or Bela Act, has sparked a storm of controversy, especially over two specific clauses. The Democratic Alliance leader, Helen Zille, has condemned these clauses, calling them part of a major revenge project against Afrikaans. But what exactly are these clauses, and why are they such a hot topic? Let's explore.
We really view the Bela Act as an important development in our statute books. It's one that we've definitely welcomed. We've always been very pro-Bela Bill, and we maintain that stance, and we eagerly await its promulgation in full, and we really are looking forward to seeing it being implemented. It's one of those, it's one of those moments where it's so incredible to see something that has been an idea for the longest of time finally being, concretized into an act that we can all see, read, and very soon hopefully implement. It's a consolidation really of different developments that have taken place. Instances where even the courts, including the Constitutional Court, have commented on the different challenges that plague equal access to education in this country. The reason why, or let me say part of the reason why the Bela Act is seen as so controversial is a difficult one really to address, because when you look at the basic education landscape in this country, there are so many issues that are of concern. We still have millions of children who have to use pit toilets, millions of children who still have to, battle with the fact that there's inadequate infrastructure in so many of our schools. And these things aren't just, the product of happenstance. There's a real history that has brought us to where we are as a country. There are laws and policies that have produced this reality where some have and some don't, and it shouldn't be that way. So part of how this is perpetuated, this inequality in basic education, is unfortunately through a mechanism that is supposed to, be an avenue for local democracy to be seen. Because, in South Africa, in our constitutional democracy, we truly prize meaningful engagement with communities. Our laws are not made in a top-down kind of fashion. Communities are involved, and in the making of Bela, like any other law, there's been extensive public consultation. Many people on different ends of the conversation have made representations. There's been robust debate all along, in a period of over 10 years to ensure that everyone's views are represented. That ultimately, whatever law or conduct, as the Constitution says, that is developed in South Africa must align with the Constitution. And equal access to education is one of those.
What is the Bela Act? On September 13, 2024, President Cyril Ramaphosa signed the Bela Act into law. This law brings changes to the education system, but clauses 4 and 5 are creating serious concerns. These clauses give more power to the Department of Basic Education over school admissions and language policies. The controversy, clauses 4 and 5. Clause 4 allows the Department of Basic Education to take control over school admission policies. Clause 5 forces school governing bodies to submit their language policies for approval by the provincial head of department. According to Zille, these clauses are unnecessary. She argues that the current laws already provide a framework for collaboration between schools, parents, and communities.
Why, President, are you taking back those two clauses of the Bela Bill? Because those two clauses are meant to address some of the injustices as well as the inequalities esizibonayo ziqhubeka.
Kodwa okwamanje omangichazele yeBela Act. IBela Act ngisayinile ukuthi kube umthetho welizwe. Ngashiya those two clauses ukuthi kuxoxwe ngazo and ingxoxo ziyaqhubeka njengamanje. Kodwa ngibeke i-termination date yalezo discussions ukuthi those discussions must come to an end at the end of December. If kungenasivumelwano, i-act le iyonke is immediately activated. The minister has started to implement the Bela Act.
On the Bela Act and its implementation. So the Bela Act as it stands is essentially ready for implementation with the exception of clauses 4 and 5. So as a department, we've already started the process of implementing the Bela Act because it is, of course, has been signed into law. In fact, we've started to engage provinces and to essentially roll out workshops that the department has started to roll out so that provinces are ready and are primed to be able to implement provisions of the Bela Act, with, of course, the exception of clauses 4 and 5. We are waiting on the consultation on clauses 4 and 5 is obviously a presidential led process, which we will be guided by as soon as that period has been completed. But insofar as the Bela Act, we are primed to implement.
Zille's criticism of the Act. Zille claims that these clauses undermine Afrikaans-medium education and could lead to its extinction. She highlights that while there are 95 English medium schools for every Afrikaans-medium school in South Africa, this new law could make Afrikaans education even more vulnerable. Zille quotes controversial statements from Gauteng officials who have questioned the necessity of Afrikaans schools in the province, including Education MEC Matume Chilwani and Premier Panyaza Lissofi.
Well, we're objecting to clauses 4 and 5 because they are not necessary. We had clauses 5 and 6 of the South African Schools Act, which was a good act, or which were completely sufficient. I wouldn't say the South African Schools Act is any more a good act. It was when it was first enacted in 1996. I don't think it's a great act anymore, but certainly clauses 5 and 6 of the South African Schools Act covered all the bases. And those clauses have been interpreted through the courts. So those clauses have been to court a number of times, and the courts have interpreted those clauses, so there's no confusion anymore about what they mean. They mean to establish a good partnership between governing bodies and schools and parents and the broader community. And that basically is what it's supposed to do, establish a partnership. And what clauses 4 and 5 of Bela does is do away with 5 and 6 of the South African Schools Act and gives all power to the head of department, which is not right.
So just in explaining that, does it actually take away the power of the schools, or does it simply say, okay, it has to be referred to the provincial head, and at that point, what happens? Is the provincial head able to override decisions that have been taken by the school through the governing body? Please explain to us again there what the consternation is for the DA.
Yes, indeed. The new clauses of the Bela Act say that in the final instance, the head of department decides. So all the other stuff that you do beforehand, the consultation, is all a box-ticking exercise. In the end, the head of the department has the final say and can override everybody else.
So if we were to assume that everything is done in a rational way, starting from the school, and decisions are taken rationally at the school level, and these decisions are then communicated to the provincial department, surely there shouldn't be any problems, should there, Ms. Zille?
Well, we're not dealing with rationality here. We've heard from what MEC Chilwani has said, we've heard from what Premier Lesofie has said repeatedly, that this is a revenge project against Afrikaans. It's a major revenge project against Afrikaans, and that is what they're doing. And we have to believe that they will do what they say they will do. Mr. Chilwani says that there's no need for a single Afrikaans-speaking school in Gauteng, meaning that he will close them all down and make sure that his head of department has the final say to prevent any Afrikaans-medium school existing anymore in Gauteng. And Panyaza Lesofie says he's continuing the 1976 uprising to do away with Afrikaans, which is completely ahistorical, because there is absolutely no historical precedent for this 1976 uprising to have anything to do with stopping Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. Black children, quite understandably and rightly, did not want to be taught through the medium of Afrikaans, but they did not want to get rid of Afrikaans as a language of instruction. And now many Afrikaans parents and children do not want to be taught through the medium of English. And according to the Constitution, having mother tongue education is a right where it is practicable. And in fact, in the Afrikaans community, in the deaf community, it's highly practicable. And what we need to be working on, and what SATU needs to be working on, is to make it accessible and practicable for all the other languages as well, rather than just fighting a revenge project against Afrikaans.
So, I cannot speak in any way, shape or form for what is alleged to have been said by the MEC for Education in Gauteng, or the Premier for that matter. But as per the Act, Ms. Zille, where does the Act make provision for such? Where does the Act actually empower anybody to get rid of Afrikaans?
Well, it does, because it basically says that the head of department has the final say on language policy, and that they can force a change of language policy at a school.
But what would that mean practically? And this is what I've been battling to understand. So are we saying that, let's say, for example, SABC High, if this is a school. So if this school, the language policy at the school is Afrikaans, my understanding was that it would simply mean that there would be provision for English classes to exist, even though the school would predominantly be an Afrikaans medium school. Is that not what it intends to do?
Well, intention and what happens are two entirely different things. So we've seen that at schools where there has been parallel medium streams, the school has very quickly become only English. Same thing at universities. Stellenbosch used to be an Afrikaans-speaking university in a majority Afrikaans-speaking province, with a majority of Afrikaans speakers who are not white. And Stellenbosch also said they were going to get a parallel medium program going, English and Afrikaans. Well, of course, now it's only English. Exactly the same thing at the University of the Free State, exactly the same thing at the University of Pretoria. Basically, it's used as a means of eradicating Afrikaans.
And see, Ms. Zille, I don't understand that, because surely that same act then empowers Afrikaans-speaking parents to ensure that there is a space for their children in the same school.
The point is that it becomes unbelievably difficult on the subsidy available to run a parallel medium school with everything in two languages and double sets of teachers and stuff. It doesn't work. It's never worked anywhere. Obviously, anybody who speaks Afrikaans, whatever their race, whatever their color, they are most warmly welcome in those schools. This has nothing to do with race. As I said, the majority of Afrikaans-speaking people are not white in South Africa. So the bottom line is this: are we going to protect the right to mother tongue education, to defend language and culture of endangered groups? Are we going to do that for isiZulu? Are we going to do that for isiXhosa? Are we going to do that for Sesotho, Setswana, all of those languages? And I think we should. That's what the Constitution requires us to do. There are 95 English medium schools for every one Afrikaans-medium school. And their numbers are falling very fast because of a dual medium policy that eventually and very soon eradicates Afrikaans.
But the reality
And when
is,
the MEC says we want to eradicate Afrikaans, you better believe him.
but Ms. Zille, we have had dual medium schools exist for the longest time. I went to school during the apartheid years, and even then there were dual medium schools where even though the majority of the children were Afrikaans home language, there were 1 or 2 English medium classes that were well, catered for, and it worked perfectly. So to say that, there is no such successful model, I would like to question that, because I think it has been done, it has been successfully done, and even today.
It is successfully done if Afrikaans can remain the majority language. 9 times out of 10, it can't. So I went to a dual medium school as well, a dual medium primary school, very poor school. It was built out of corrugated iron. We had bucket toilets. Most of the kids didn't have shoes. I was lucky enough to have shoes. A very, very poor school in the platteland of Gauteng at the time. And that worked well because it was 90% Afrikaans, I would say. But there was never a risk that there would be a demand for 90% English. And that is the problem. The language gets eradicated, especially if you look at the wording of the Act and what has to happen there. But above all, you've got to listen to what Panyaza Lesufi says and to what Chilwani says.
No, but
If
Ms.
they
Zille,
say
Ms.
this
Zille,
is to get rid of Afrikaans, you better believe them.
no, but they don't speak for all of South Africa, and as I say, I cannot even corroborate, what was said by either of them. But to the point of eradicating Afrikaans, surely that is not possible. There are too many Afrikaans-speaking people in this country, the majority of whom are not even white South Africans. So surely there will be enough protection for the language in the country.
Well, if you stop teaching a language and if it stops being a language of education, it quickly unravels.
But how is it going to stop? Because I'm looking at a situation whereby, for example, you live in an area where the school is an Afrikaans medium school. And you're saying, well, yes, this is an Afrikaans medium school, but there are in this very same area a number of English speaking children. Can't we accommodate the English children in a class in this predominantly Afrikaans speaking school? Is that not what the Act is intending to do?
No, not at all. If you look at the definitions in the Act, they say that it has to conform to the language of people in the education district. Now, the education district is huge. It's massive. And there won't be an education district anywhere in South Africa, except perhaps in the Northern Cape, where the majority of people speak Afrikaans.
So how then, to date, have Afrikaans medium schools managed to exist and remain Afrikaans first language?
Because the laws allowed them to.
But the same law will still apply, won't it?
No, it's being amended in such a way as to not allow it.
But if that argument then, Ms. Zille, could be made for any language in South Africa. You mentioned earlier, isiZulu, isiXhosa, whatever other language, the same argument can then be made.
Yes.
And surely that is not what is envisaged for the country.
It is. If you read the Constitution, Section 29, for example, go and read it.
The Constitution?
Yes. If people want mother tongue education, it has to be provided where it is practicable to do so. Now, Afrikaans speakers have made huge advances in turning Afrikaans into an academic language from the lowest levels of pre-primary right up till postdoctoral levels. And they've made all that effort and written dictionaries and done whatever. The deaf community has also done a fantastic amount of work to make South African Sign Language a language of instruction. And I take my hat off to the deaf community because they have said this is our mother tongue. We want education in our mother tongue. And we're going to make the effort to have it. And they first had to have a battle to make sure that their mother tongue was recognized as an official language of South Africa. And I fully support that. Look what they've done. They've really done an enormous amount of work. Now, for every one Afrikaans-speaking school, there are 95 English-speaking schools. So in any education district, anyone, except perhaps in the Northern Cape where almost everybody speaks Afrikaans, the number of English-speaking schools will far outnumber the Afrikaans-speaking schools. And it's not too much to say that having built those up through the Afrikaans-speaking community, they should be allowed to keep Afrikaans mother tongue education. And then we can really focus on what we're supposed to be focusing on, which is not destroying the Afrikaans-medium schools, but building up mother tongue in other languages too.
Is this not about South Africa making sure that all children are able to access schools in their communities, regardless of which language they speak? Because we have 12 official languages in this country, and every child speaking any of those languages should be accommodated.
Yes, absolutely. But for every place there's an Afrikaans school, there'll be an English school as well.
Yes, but if the English school is 20 kilometers away, why can't provision be made for those children in what is an Afrikaans medium school?
I think provision should be made for them in Afrikaans. Absolutely. Remember that whole outcry in Schweizer many years ago? There they made provision for Afrikaans-speaking children. I think they said Tswana-speaking. They made provision for Afrikaans-speaking children, for Tswana-speaking children in the Afrikaans school, but they had to learn to integrate and be part of the Afrikaans school, and then they retain Afrikaans.
So exactly that. Where Afrikaans-speaking children need to be accommodated in predominantly English-speaking schools, that should happen as well.
Yes, indeed.
So we're not disagreeing on that score. And again, if anybody in the education feeder zone wants to attend school in Afrikaans, they must be allowed to. Absolutely. But Ms. Zille, we are out of time. I quickly want to ask you. So this act has, of course, sparked heated discussion among the GNU members as well. So what would be the implication to the GNU should there be a failure to reach consensus on this particular matter?
Well, we'll have to wait for the president. I don't want to leapfrog the process. The president will have to look at the report, which is very detailed and very thorough. And then the president will have to take a step that is rational in law, and we will help make sure that he does.
And if the step he takes is not rational in law, according to what you view that to be, are you taking this to court?
Well, it's not what we view it to be, it's what our lawyers view it to be. And we may take it to court, we may take more drastic action, but I don't want to leapfrog the process, as I said. I don't want to leapfrog the process and run ahead of what the president is likely to say.
Language rights and the Constitution. Zille argues that the Constitution guarantees the right to mother tongue education where possible. Afrikaans-speaking communities have spent years building educational infrastructure in their language, and Zille believes this right could be undermined by the Bela Act.
I think it's important to remember that the Bela Act comes about after about 3 decades of this new legal framework that governs basic education. And within that framework, for instance, if you turn to the South African Schools Act, which is one of the acts that the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act makes amendments to, within that, there are already provisions that make it so that provincial departments of education can intervene. In fact, in court cases such as the Ravonia case, in Ermelo and others, the Constitutional Court has even emphasized that the power of school governing bodies is not subject to absolute autonomy, and no one can ever interfere with it, because within the South African Schools Act, there are provisions that specifically make reference to the fact that, in its previous form, before this amendment, the provincial departments of education could actually withdraw the ability of a school, for instance, to determine their own language policy. That was already permissible. What the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act actually does then in this regard is that it concretizes principles that the courts have already pronounced on. and that are already acceptable in our law. The only challenge is that you find that the insiders, so to speak, who make these policies, who frame who is acceptable within their school environments, which obviously wouldn't be the black and poor learner, don't really take kindly to that. And that's why the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act is so important.
Please expand on exactly why the DA believes that clauses 4 and 5 of the Bela Act aim to eradicate or destroy Afrikaans. What specific legal or maybe even constitutional issues do you have with the two clauses?
Good afternoon. Well, I think we've just got to look at what has been said by the MEC for Education in Gauteng. He said that in the formation that the Bela Act is now, clause 4 and clause 5, there's no place for any Afrikaans-medium schools in Gauteng anymore. So it's not only our interpretation, it is exactly what has been said. The problem that we've got here is for 30 years, the ANC government that was in place for 30 years did not build enough schools. They did not train enough teachers. And now they want to come and they want to implement this in an answer to their failures over 30 years. You cannot do something that will really be to the detriment of a language. And we are not only talking about Afrikaans language. The ANC government in the past failed to promote mother tongue education. They failed to promote isiXhosa, isiZulu, Tswana, Venda schools. They failed to do that. So we've got to correct what was done wrong, but not making another wrong. And we've got to go through with the promotion of mother tongue education and not hampering it.
The Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, specifically within clauses 4 and 5, they still allow the schools, in fact, they specifically state that schools still retain their role in terms of formulating education policy. It then goes on further to say that such policies must be reviewed by the HODs within the provincial education departments. Now, a further consideration that we must take into account is that the Bela Act further avails procedural guidelines for how this relationship is supposed to work. Because I think one of the reasons why we'd often find SGBs in provincial education departments before our courts was because there was this tussle to say, no, but this is my jurisdiction, this is an area that I have the power to determine, and it's not yours, so there's a constant back and forth. What we then have now is specific guidelines that even tell us how to then resolve it. Should it be the case that, for instance, a school comes up with a language policy, submits it for review, and perhaps the HOD does not deem it fit to proceed with, there's still a remedy that the court can do. Administrative justice in this country is such that, there has to be internal remedies before we turn to litigation. And that's one of the mechanisms that are now built into the education system through the Bela Act. So if a school is dissatisfied with the outcome of such a decision, they may still approach the MEC, for instance. And that applies for both Section 4 and Section 5 as it concerns admissions policies as well as language policies.
Legal action and the DA's next steps. Zille makes it clear, if these clauses go through, the DA is prepared to challenge them legally. The party is awaiting the outcome of government consultations on the Bela Act, but Zille is resolute in her opposition. In conclusion, Helen Zille has raised a powerful warning about the potential consequences of the Bela Act for Afrikaans-medium education in South Africa. Could this be the beginning of the end for Afrikaans in schools? Or will the DA succeed in blocking these clauses? What do you think? Is the Bela Act a threat to Afrikaans education? Or is it simply a necessary reform for the future of South African school? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Inkari. It's time for more insightful discussion on South African politics and education. Stay tuned for updates on this unfolding story. Thanks for watching and take care.